myself.
What's up guys, thanks for joining me. Now, I am a big Marvel fan, and with Avengers Infinity War coming out in just a few months, I thought it would be really fun to attempt to power carve the Infinity Gauntlet. This first go around, I used a single 2x8 of Douglas Fir that I got from Home Depot, and ripped it down to a width just under 6 inches. After ripping, I passed it through my planer on both sides to clean up the edges. Then cut my pieces into specific lengths that would allow me to stack laminate them together to a specific overall shape. Now if you just had a solid piece of wood, I suppose you could skip everything I just did and go right to the next part. After labeling each piece so I'd know what order to put them back in, I individually cut holes in the first 9 pieces with a drill and a jigsaw, which would allow me to stick my arm into this thing, which is a completely optional step. Next, using a to scale template that I printed, I laid out and glued everything up. So the bandsaw that I wanted to use didn't really work out. It just didn't have the cutting capacity that I hoped for. So instead, I borrowed a chainsaw, which was much more efficient, and it got this thing looking more like a glove really quickly. Next up was the main part of the shaping. I used a turbo plane to power carve it as best I could, mostly guesswork as it was a 3D shape that I had designed two-dimensionally. After carving, you can use a 40 grit flap disc to smooth out all of your carves and refine the curves. And I'll just say it now, in reality, I actually really rushed through this step and I wasn't really happy with the design from here on out. So, hoping to salvage this version, I went ahead and used a Dremel tool to do as much detailed work as possible, basing my design off of the movie prop version of the glove, which I was never going to get perfect, but I thought if I could get close, then it would be cool. Okay, so I'm actually going to put pause on this project entirely. This is as far as I got on it. You can see it's actually pretty close to being done, but I'm just not happy with it. This looks nothing like a thumb. I don't even know what I did on top here, and to be honest, I'm just not happy with how the design of the sleeve came out. So, what it means is I need to go back to the drawing board and figure out what I did wrong there to make this look better. I want to change the design of the hand so that it's not so much a fist, but rather kind of an open hand. The second thing is how I approach actually carving out the armor on the sleeve. What I did was create essentially like a carve by numbers kind of thing, which means that the armor would be broken into sections, all numbered, and each number would represent a different depth that I would carve to. I realized it would be better also to use plywood. I thought the strata of a really nice looking plywood would actually look really cool in a final result. So I went back to the same process. I cut out those strips, and then I cut them into smaller sections and then glued them together. So once the thing was dried and it was ready to be power carved, I printed out that design and glued it onto the face of the log. That way I could carve the profile of it this way and then rotate it 90 degrees and carve the profile of it this way. And now you'll notice that I skipped the whole cutting the hole in the pieces so that I could stick my arm in it, and I don't have a chainsaw for this round. The whole sticking the arm thing in it is cool, but it didn't seem as important to me. If I really want to do it, I could probably go back and borrow a chainsaw and carve out a hole in it. So this is as far as I've gotten with the new plywood version, and to be honest, it already looks better to me. It has incredible detail in just the layers. They're really high quality. I was able to spend a lot of time getting in here and carving and actually making it look like a hand. The next steps for me are to figure out how to really detail this, as well as do the final power carve by numbers thing where I end up with the really detailed armor and it looks just like the movie for it. So knowing I was starting off from a much better place, this entire sequence is basically what you saw before. I used various small tools, so drill bits to hog out material for the underside of the fingers, my angle grinder again with a flap disc to smooth everything over. Here you see me tackling the main part of my carve by numbers process. So what I would do is just draw out the design onto the piece of wood, and then using my angle grinder and a flap disc, I would leave one specific part of it untouched and carve away the rest of the material. Then I could go back and repeat that process with another layer, leaving the previous layer plus this new layer completely untouched, and then again carve away the rest of the material. And so then layer by layer I could carve it back to look like pieces of armor that were overlapping each other. And I was pleasantly surprised with how well this turned out. This whole process took about 4 hours. I was pretty slow and methodical about it, all to just add as much detail as I could to this thing. Checking the photo references I had very often to make sure I wasn't carving in places I shouldn't or designing something that was inaccurate. And although the final product isn't perfect, I'm much happier with how this one came out. Lastly, I did finish it off by smoothing everything over with some 400 grit sandpaper. Now I thought to bring out some detail, I'd experiment with using a blowtorch to lightly burn the wood. And I thought it was pretty cool how it came out. It darkened it overall, it brought out the edges more, and overall it just upped the contrast and dynamic look of this thing. Now for finishing, I went with just a simple tung oil, and this took much longer than I'm showing as the plywood soaked up a lot of the oil and I was constantly pouring and working in the oil for about 15 minutes. And in looking back, I think something like a polyurethane would have worked much better for a project like this. And so it was done, for now at least. This was really challenging. I only know how to design in 2D, so in taking that and making it into something 3D, I learned it requires a lot more patience and checking your work to get the design you intended. Maybe if I'm ambitious, I can add some Infinity Stone LEDs to this, but for now, I'll just enjoy what I created and keep counting down the days until May 4th. Thanks for watching.